In this session, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to address two very big topics. The first is Indonesia's foreign policy under Yudhoyono. As I said yesterday, it's been a period of, I think, unprecedented prominence for Indonesia on the international stage. And we're very lucky to have Fitriyani to talk to us about Indonesian foreign policy. Evie is the head of the International Relations Department in the Faculty of Social and Political Sciences at the University of Indonesia. She's the co-founder of the ASEAN Studies Centre at the University of Indonesia. She also holds the position of Indonesia's country coordinator for the network of East Asian think tanks. She helped establish the Master's Program on European Studies at the University of Indonesia and has been part of the peer group in the program. She did her PhD here at the ANU in political science and international relations. Our second topic is on environmental protection in Indonesia during the Yudhoyono years. It was a topic that generated a great deal of enthusiasm during SBY's early years. Some very stringent legislation and actions were promised, but as we'll see, I think, the actual delivery has fallen short of the promise. And we're lucky to talk to us about that a team of three specialists. First of all, Patrick Anderson from the Forest Peoples Program. He lived in Indonesia from 2001 to 2012, where he worked with a range of environment and human rights groups. His research in recent years has focused on the right of communities to give or withhold their free, prior, informed consent to development plans that will affect them. Following Patrick, we will then have Afi Mahaningtyas, who has worked in the non-government sector in Indonesia for 25 years, primarily in environmental policy and practice, community business development, women's empowerment, Indigenous people's rights and governance reform. She's currently an advisor to the Climate Land Use Alliance and works with all the major government, industry and NGO players on climate change policy in Indonesia. Then we'll have Asep Firdaus, who is a public interest lawyer and has held a litigation license from the Indonesian Advocates Association since 2002. He's an expert on natural resources and agrarian law, lawmaking procedures and systems of law in Indonesia, and has conducted legal research on these issues for over 15 years. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Evie Fitriyani.
Dignitaries, Professor, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It is a great pleasure for me to come back here to Canberra, for where I had a very good time during my student's time. When I was a student, I used to be the volunteer of Indonesian Updates too. So it's great to come back here. Thank you for the conveners and their team who bring me there. This morning, I would like to share with you my thought on my observation on the Yudhoyono's foreign policy and whether we can see that as it is an indication of Indonesian rising. Yudhoyono became Indonesian president in the time when there are so many changes in the world politics and economy, and also some fluctuation in geopolitical in East Asia, and also there are so many problems in Indonesia itself. As a country, Indonesia has to face so many challenges, and as a president, he has to take the country not only to pursue its national interests, but also to contribute positively to the global peace, and that's the message from the Constitution. So we'll see whether he has been successful in that and what kind of legacy he left for Indonesian foreign policy. And in my presentation, I will go through 6 phases. I will see the difficult study points and then Yudhoyono's policy, where they see some challenges, and whether it is Indonesia's rising. And then I would like to see also his personal attributes, because actually later in the papers, I will use the theory of actor-specific to see the role of leaders like him in the Indonesian, in the foreign policy of a country. And then I conclude at the end. I'll start the first one, the difficult starting point. When Yudhoyono became Indonesian president in 2004, he had to face so many difficulties, not only international changes in the global and regional, but also domestically. In the global scheme, he has to see the relative decline of Western power and the re-emergence of China. In regional scheme, he has to see some effort of ASEAN countries to create what they call ASEAN community, and problem in South China Sea, as well as the problem of conflict borders between states within ASEAN itself. And then in national level, he at least have to face 5 troubles. The first is the aftershocks of the financial crisis. 2004, Indonesia was still under a very difficult economic situation. This means resources to do international relations, to undertake very effective diplomacy was limited. The second, the country was still undergone, until now actually, political reformation. And not only because it's a very major shift from the authoritarian states to democratic states, but also it sparked religious, social, and cultural unrest in the country. Such a dangerous situation, and even the threat of disunity is very apparent at that time. And one of the result of that is the separation of Timor-Leste from Indonesia. And another one is we also have to face the terrorist attack and bombings in Jakarta and Bali. So all those circumstances domestically, the outlook of the country in the international forum is very bleak. It is not an easy task for Indonesian diplomats at the time to do their diplomacy. Even one of the very senior diplomats told me that during that period, it's very, very difficult for them. It is impossible, like a mission impossible to do Indonesian foreign to do a kind of diplomacy mission at that time, because everybody will look them as a very poor, come from poor country. So it's create inconfidence in Indonesian diplomatic community at that time. And for Indonesia, this is it's quite a blow, because previous president during Sukarno and Suharto, despite all the troubles at home, they have very high-profile international reputation. So when it comes to the beginning of Yudhoyono's presidency, I would say that's very difficult position for them. That's for the starting point. And then what happened during his period? There are some development, there are some economic growth, there are a democratic transition, despite all the problems that we have been heard since yesterday. There is some progression in the political transition. And there are also some the political stability has been maintained, and at least the unity of Indonesia, NKRI, Negara Kesatuan Republik Indonesia, has been maintained. So with those attributes, there are so many prize has been given to the president, and not to mention about Indonesia is the most populous Muslim country, the country with the biggest Muslim population, and the fact that it can take democratization process quite or relatively peaceful, tell to the world that Indonesia can be also become a functioning Muslim democracy. In the social relation, we have heard this morning a lot of problem, but the perception from outside the international community is quite good for him. So during especially the end of his first term, there actually we see the more confidence in foreign policy. And this also affect the community of Indonesia diplomats. They feel more confident to do further international relations during the second period rather than the first period. What is now the second term? What is Yudhoyono foreign policy? What he has done for Indonesia during this period in the international level? First, I would have to mention that ASEAN is still the cornerstone of Indonesian foreign policy. And Indonesia, already, during his presidency, spent a significant amount of time, energy, and attention to ASEAN. And ASEAN was undergone the preparation to build what they call ASEAN community. And one of the highlights during his period is ASEAN Summit in 2011, in which Indonesia became the host and managed to issue the Bali Concord III. That's what we'll be doing by ASEAN country after the achievement of ASEAN community. And within this ASEAN, the preparation for ASEAN community get a lot of attention, even though a lot of people, including me, based on my research, said that it is not enough yet compared to other countries have done for ASEAN preparation for ASEAN community. But considering the country with 240 million people, to socialize the idea of ASEAN community is very difficult. So with that, I would like to see that he put some effort and some attention to this project. And last but not least, in the ASEAN context, the problem of South China Sea, in which we see the assertiveness of China in South China Sea that has been claimed also by Vietnam, Malaysia, the Philippines, and Brunei. And how ASEAN should be, his proposition is ASEAN should be the mediator in this issue. It is not a bilateral issue between China and ASEAN countries, but also between ASEAN and China. And the proportion that has been refused by China actually, but ASEAN consistently try to do that, even though we know there is no always common position of ASEAN in this issue. We can come back to this issue later. That's about ASEAN. But Yudhoyono also brought Indonesian policy beyond ASEAN. ASEAN, during his period, we saw ASEAN drive several regional initiatives, not because ASEAN is so strong or so forceful, but because of the circumstances, because of the dynamic of East Asia geopolitics, because the big countries like China, Japan, and Korea, none of them will be accepted to be the leader in the region. So it's ASEAN have to be the driver in the driver's seats. So in that case, ASEAN managed to continue and to strengthen ASEAN Plus 3, ASEAN not very much developed on ASEAN Regional Forum. There are some difficulties in that, but the East Asia Summit has been one of the highlights, including the assessment of the United States and Russia to the summit in 2011. And lastly, there are also development in regional comprehensive economic partnership of these ASEAN plus 6 countries. And so there's some difficult development in the ASEAN, beyond ASEAN. But more than that, Yudhoyono also tried to go beyond further ASEAN and Asia Pacific, when he also, not because of him, but also other countries like the United States and major countries invite Indonesia to G20 and make Indonesia the only state from Southeast Asia to attend this G20, and also with Australia. So of course, like Australia, we are very proud of that. There's a lot of complaint from other Southeast Asian countries, but maybe because of not only because of some of achievement that we can be there. In terms of economic also, of course, we are not that strong. But Yudhoyono also tried to bring Indonesia not to be involved too much in the conflict or the competition between the United States and China. by maintaining close relation with China, at the same time make a comprehensive partnership with the United States. Indeed, during his period, we have seen kind of more closer relation with Indonesia and United States. Even though Obama canceled the visit several times, he eventually made it. So there was a observation. There is a opinion that Indonesia kind of bit leaning to United States during his period. And in addition, he also took us another prestigious position as a member of high-level panel of eminent persons on the post-2015 development agenda. This is the United Nations project. So not only in the region, not to mention so many international agreements and initiative that has been joined by Indonesia during his term. So during this period, Indonesia has been projected itself as a country with the biggest Muslim population, moderate Muslim, but can also work with both sides, with Muslim country and also with Western country. Some senior diplomats, when have discussion, insist that Indonesia has been the bridge between the West and the East and the North and the South during this period. I know a lot of people don't agree with that. I will also have some clarification with that. But at least we can talk. If somebody like China would like to have an upgraded CHAFTA with Southeast Asian country, with ASEAN. The first country the China president comes is to Indonesia and offer that issue in Indonesian parliament, in the front of Indonesian parliament. And also when the South China Sea become very turbulent and become escalation to a dangerous degree, the United Nations Secretary General approached Indonesia, President Yudhoyono, for Indonesia to take a role. So during this period, we have seen Indonesia have some credibility to be this bridge. The third area that I think Indonesia has been done during the Yudhoyono's presidency is act as a participation or help to build norms in international relations. What I mean by norms is because in this sense, Indonesia is not only telling countries to be democratized themselves, but also show the role model. Indonesia, despite all the difficulties that we have seen in these 2 days, Indonesia has become a functional Muslim democracy. And our democracy is through dialogue, not through condemnation. This is what we would like to tell the Western country who persistently ask other countries to be democratized. We don't have to do that. We cannot claim credits for the Myanmar transition, but Indonesia and ASEAN countries also involved in some socialization of democratic norms in ASEAN with Myanmar. So we can talk more about this later. So this is the norm building, and I said that actually the norms of democratic country can be also spread peacefully, not through sanction or criticism. Another one is he also initiated the interfaith dialogue. We know there's a lot of problem of Muslim and minority groups in Indonesia, but in the front of international community, Indonesia has been the champion on interfaith dialogue. Even the European, when they had difficulties to overcome the Islamic fundamentalists and the nationalist tendency from the existing country, existing citizen toward the migration, some of Indonesian ambassador in the European countries offer help. Why don't you we export our interfaith dialogue forum? That's what they said, and they sent some ulamas, Indonesia moderate thinkers to Europe. The last one, Yudhoyono also make another change in Indonesian foreign policy by emphasis on the economic diplomacy, open non-traditional market for Indonesian product, and more persistent in border negotiation. Just last several months, we had to conclude the border negotiation with with the Philippines and Singapore. Indonesia is bordered with 10 countries, and most of them are not solved yet. including Australia. What's the challenges? I mentioned before, the challenges geopolitics in Southeast Asia because of the ASEAN, the process of ASEAN integration and the pivot of United States, the re-emergence of China, etc. This make some complication in the regional setting. This is what sometimes Indonesia has been accused of pro-United States, leaning to the West, etc. And also by the Western country, the developing country, used to be the developing country group in the United Nations. They always criticize Indonesia, not appreciate Indonesian performance the last several years because they say Indonesia left the developing country and try to join the developed country. Another one is the criticism from the inside, lack of assertiveness vis-a-vis other states. We have heard a lot about this. The indecisive Yudhoyono makes a lot of Indonesian people think that we should do something more to this country because they do something that we don't like, violate our waters, violate our territory, or do something bad to our migrants, worker migrants. But Yudhoyono restrained to do that and try to solve it more peacefully. So the one tendency is there is an international reputation, very good, and there is a domestic criticism. So what happened actually this one? Whether we can see that as an Indonesian rising, what is the criteria of rising? In international textbook, we know the rising is when the country have a very strong and economic and military powers. Indonesia do not have such capability. Indonesia don't even be able to know when other country come to the get into their waters back and forth several times. So how can you say it's a big country rising? I'm not agree with that because I thought it's not fulfill the criteria. But then we think, whose narration is that? Why is Indonesia then thought as a rising country? And then most of these appreciation the narration come from the Western countries, the country that think has done very good. And my observation for that is because has behaved or bring Indonesian policy in line with their interests and values. That's what it was. He has been praised as a good boy. So then we'll come to the conclusion. So it is a kind of appeasement for him, appeasement for some people in the country. Some people in the country is very happy to be said as Indonesian rising. But those who understand the politics and international relations know that there are some problem in that narration. So this appeasement, why Yudhoyono like this kind of appeasement and why this appeasement works? Because of his personality and how this personality influence is in his foreign policy. That's actually my argument. And with this, I would like to see motivation, emotion, problem, representation. I'll go very quick because I ran out of time. The motivation, we have his personal goals. Menjadi orang, already mentioned by Gregfully yesterday. He would like to be something from his very humble beginnings. And also, I see the motivation also come from the pressure of the family and peer groups to be a successful person, to maintain the line of successful family. In the emotion, he's passionate with everything international, especially those come from the West. And another one, he will choose non-conflictual approach. So with this approach, the way he see the problem is very different from other people. And for him, to take care of the problem outside the country is much, much easier than taking care of the problem domestically. Because outsider, he always been praised, he always been said good, but inside, whatever he said, he will be criticized. So from one of his very close aides, I got an information that for him, it's much more easy and much more willing to do external relation rather than domestic relation, actually. Okay, can I get one more? Okay, that's why the very famous saying of him, 1,000 friends, 0 enemy, come from this kind of non-conflictual approach, but very much want to have high profile. And in his book pasti ada pilihan, very thick one. There is a phrase that mentioned the international community more understand the value of his work rather than his fellow in Indonesia. This is why I think he's prefer to handling international relations rather than domestic issues. Conclusion. Just three conclusions. Yudhoyono personality shaped this approach to foreign policy, and Yudhoyono legacy in Indonesian foreign policy actually to re-establish Indonesia in the country Indonesia in the global map. So not only not to make Indonesia rising, but because after so many difficulties, just to bring back the country to the map of the nation, to the re-establish Indonesian position previously. That's, I think, his legacy. And this attribute rising is misleading because it doesn't match with Indonesian reality and because it's usually used as appeasement. With this, I would like to conclude. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everyone. I wanted to thank the organisers of Indonesia Update, and in particular Ed Aspinall and John McCarthy, for inviting us to make a paper and a presentation on environment and SBA's environmental legacy. Myself and Afi and Asep are not academics. I guess we'd call ourselves more activists, and we really valued the challenge to us to stand back, to reflect, and then to have to research and write to make this paper. So I hope if you read the paper that you'll also bear in mind that it's not our usual form. Nevertheless, we hope you'll find it interesting. Our presentation will cover climate change policy and the promulgation and implementation of a new environmental law. The history of environmental issues in Indonesia goes back many decades, and there's a close link between environment and human rights. And in many ways, we can see the environmental struggle coming out of human rights struggles, justice for farmers, the right to a clean environment. And I think you'll see some of this reflected into the presentation. That's enough from me. We're hoping to finish in 20 minutes. I'd like to hand over to Afi, who will present on climate change policy. Thank you.
Selamat siang, Om Swastiastu. So basically, thank you, Ibu Evi, for introducing all of these international policies on that, because pretty much that would introduce what we're going to present on the climate change front. So a lot of international commitment were made during SBY year, especially for the second term, 2009-2014. So this is, I made this for 2 days to try to remember and not to confuse people on so many products that were there during when we decided to be the host of COP 13 in 2007 until today. I think little that the world leaders back then who made commitment on climate change would think that transparency is key and would be also going to the governance and not just the technical terms. There are a lot of political influences that have to be handled during the implementation. So when President SBY made their commitment in 2009 to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by 26% if we do it on our own, and 41% if we were helped by international support, and reduce it by 2020 from business as usual. It took at least 3 years to translate that on the ground. So since then we have, you can read all of these policies, I'm not going to go through that. But at the same time, you see the alarming orange lines here, which says that, does it really materialize on the ground or not? But we see the deforestation rate is still hanging very high, 450 to 840,000 hectares. These numbers are debated. There is no formal number that would be saying that this is our rate consistently. Moratorium area shrunk by 5 million hectares. Forest fires is still continuing despite after 12 years, then we finally signed the Transboundary Haze Act with ASEAN. And deforestation-driven development implementation, including MP3EI, which is acceleration of economic development. All of this will drive us into more deforestation. Conflict, unilateral gazettement of forests, forest license corruption, criminalization of communities and indigenous peoples, impunity of corporate crime are still there. So this is the contrast of what the government tried to do, good and well-intentioned, very well covered at international level, get a lot of prize, but what does it mean when we go to the district and ask them, Mr. Bupati, can you please help us reduce until 26 to 41%? Huh? What does it mean? So all of this confusion, I'll go to, oops. Let's do this. Sorry. I'm challenged. Thank you. So this is what we showed to the president the first time as, we have so many forests. He's so happy. Wow, it's all green. But wait a minute. The second one is, but that's all already divided into concessions. We actually don't have forests anymore. If all of that concessions cut and clear and the whole forest, then this is what we found out. So there is no reference when we present this, and then we say, so which map that we're going to use? There are hundreds of maps, and we don't have one reference, and this is what triggered, we need a one map. And then this is the debates on how deforestation number. The current Hansen map, or this is from the Maryland University in excuse me, Margono, shows the discrepancies. The blue one is the Hansen, the red one is the Ministry of Forestry. You see how different they are. They claim for 450,000. We have decreased from what claimed previous year way long ago from 3 million to now we only deforested 450,000 hectares every year. But at the same time, during Yudhoyono year, the moratorium year of 2011 and 2012, we see the deforestation increase at the higher rate. This is just to show how we haven't handled very well on haze and forest fire. We haven't really get into the core who's actually burned the forest on the ground, and peat also. But recently there are 27 corporates who brought to KPK and is under investigation. This is the current status of moratorium area. We lost 5 million hectares since it was introduced in 2011. We can discuss about this later. Now, why it's important to compare with Brazil. And this is the number comparison, but with Brazil and Indonesia deforestation. So the note that we get, the learning note from our Brazilian colleagues through discussions are that they have a very radical and simple transparency campaign with a very strong national leadership where everyone can actually participate in tracking even the cows that goes to the illegal land. Land registry is very diligent, law in order, resulting very many politicians and leaders to jail during the reform. It took about 12 years for Brazil to do that. It's very clear for Brazil. The goal is to reduce deforestation. In their national plan, they say that they're going to reduce 80%, and this national plan was launched in 2007. We don't have. Indonesia doesn't have a target of reducing deforestation to a certain time or certain percentage. Conclusion. The conclusion, I think it's consistent. When the president can make a good decision, timely, and can make difference, he missed that. So missing momentum. But he's a good manager. He delegates a lot, especially things that take risk, delegate. Not very strategic, utilizing political momentum, untimely in taking decision. What he doesn't realize is the climate change policies involve complex governance. The fact that we're moving this far, as there's this big role of KPK, taking 12 ministries to get the forest gazettement. It's important to get the forest gazettement because this is the certainty of what land, what rights, and who will have to manage it. Institutional conflicts, contested laws, and unresolved conflicts between companies and communities are left hanging right now for the next administration to tackle. So this is a good inheritance for Jokowi for the next one. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good morning, and everybody. Selamat pagi. I'm going to continue the presentation that is delivered by Afi, and this is another part of our paper. So this is have close relation with the point that Afi presented. My presentation is going to present the SBY government and environmental law. And this is the figures that so many problem of environmental in Indonesia. And of course, we have to be honest that SBY and his administration inherited many environmental problem from the previous administration. We can see that forest fire and then illegal logging, water pollution, and also the land grabbing, by the large-scale industry. And then we can see also at the end, this problem created conflict in the ground between the affected peoples, which most of them are the poor, versus the permit holders or the concession holders. And most of them also indigenous peoples that are the victim of the conflict. And then in 2009, to address this issue, a national environmental law was issued, number 32, which contained many progressive clauses. But we have to see and to know that this law actually initiated by the parliament, not by the president or SBY. And then, so I think this law, this new law on the environment is not SBY not give the contribution to issue this environmental law. And then we can see that in the new law, in the environmental law, number 32, 2009, there is some progressive clause. I will mention some of these. Firstly, there is a new mechanism for environmental impact assessment that are required for activities that cause water pollution, deforestation that I mentioned about this picture. The environmental impact assessment must show the impact and how they will be minimized before the environmental permit is issued. Then the environmental permit are a requirement for any person wanting to obtain the development license. If a business license, for example, a plantation license or mining license is issued without the necessary environmental permit, the permit is null and void, and or maybe cancelled. So in the new law, this is the progressive one, and the difference between the previous law number 23 in 1997. This is there is only AMDAL, not environmental permit, and this is and because of that, it is now easier for the environmental defender to sue the permit to go to the administration court, because this is now the decision, not only the research on the environmental impact assessment. And in the protection, another clause is protection for environmental activists. This is also the guarantee, from the new law to the activists who advocate the environmental problem in Indonesia. And also the third, that is for me it is important, is criminal sanction for the official. If the official grant permission without meeting the conditions that are set out in environmental law, or are deliberately not providing responsible oversight of compliance, they can be prosecuted. So this is good clause, but until now there is no official bring into the court. And in the next slide, actually there is a momentum for improvement in the SBY administration, because SBY has a commitment in the environmental issue that set up target for taking 100 environmental, like you can see in the slide, taking 100 environmental cases to the court every year. But I think this is very big number to bring the environmental cases to the court. And another commitment is that also aim to lower greenhouse gas by closer control to environmental permit. Of course, it is using environmental permit that is required for any exploitative industries. It means that in the new law, with the environmental permit, SBY actually can control the activity of the industry that harm the environment. If SBY use the new law on environmental law, I think there is a big expectation from civil society to change the situation that has been mentioned about the cases. Yeah, this is the situation that after the issuance of environmental law, we can still see that the Ministry of Environmental has less power other than the sectoral ministry, for example, energy and mining, plantation and agriculture and forestry. Because the Ministry of Environment and Environment remains an kind of underdog or anak bawang in kementerian in SBY cabinet. So because the authority of this kementerian, the Ministry of Environment, is only formulate and establish policy to manage and to protect environment, coordinate and synchronization of policy implementation in the field, and supervise the execution of tasks in the field. So I think compared to the other powerful ministry, kind of energy and mining and plantation, the Ministry of Environment has less power. Then I will present the case study. There is three cases. I think this is the good news from us for the environmental application. There is three cases. The first, the 3 puppet land swamp in Aceh that Afi has mentioned about it. This is the good news from the ruling from the local court, because in violation of the law, using the fire to clear up to 1,000 hectares of its forest, and the court giving the decision that the PT Kalista Alam must pay compensation amount approximately $1 million, and then the government must undertake environmental remediation to provide a cost for remediation, approximately $25.5 million, and its license is revoked. So I think this is the good news for us. Then we have another 2 cases, but I think we can discuss it later after the presentation. And the last one is the conclusion. Actually, the release of new environmental law provide a great opportunity for SBY administration to realize its promise on environmental issue. And then the progressive court decision gives some hope for us in the future, despite the weak effort in environmental law enforcement by SBY administration. And also for the new government, I think Jokowi needs to be consistent in enforcement of environmental law. It needs to strengthen the Ministry of Environmental so that it is able to defend the environment against the stronger ministries, and it needs to issue the government regulation that is mandated by the new environmental law that will allow it to be implemented. I think that's my presentation. Thank you.
Okay, we have about 10 or 15 minutes for questions, and microphones around the place. We'll take 1, 2, 3 to start with, please.
Thank you so much. My name is Fitriyani from Crawford School of Public Policy at the ANU. Thanks so much for the very interesting presentations. I'd like to ask perhaps the trio of Patrick, Asep, and Afi, because it's close to my research. Within the 10 years President Susilo Bambang Yudhoyono's period, I'm just wondering whether you could reflect on his decisions in establishing new agencies. It's not only one, but a couple of different agencies to tackle environmental related issues, in which, in my view, reflect his distrust to his own ministries. As you can see, we got Minister of Forestry, Minister of Environment, and so on, but he created the RED agency, he created UKP 4, and he created the National Council on Climate Change. The second question, if I may, to Ibu Evi Fitriyani, the kind of Yudhoyono's interventions at the international level, and you mentioned that it's not necessarily appreciated at the national or local level. Do you see this as kind of like escape way of President Susilo Yudhoyono, in which he sees that his policies throughout the 10 years regarding a lot of things are not necessarily linked or are not necessarily supported by his coalition somehow? So I'm just wondering whether you can, reflect on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, please.
Thank you. My name is Ahmad Rais. I'm from University of Melbourne. My question for Bu Evi Fitriyani is regarding about ASEAN roles in resolving the South China Sea dispute. Do you think consensus and negotiation with Code of Conduct will resolve the dispute, or do you think the involvement of U.S., Australia, or Japan in balancing China in the region will be beneficial for ASEAN itself? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yes.
Yeah, I have a question for Ibu Evi. Hi, Debbie. I have a question that I'm afraid might annoy Dewi a little bit. That's why I said hello to Dewi. Actually, I've wondered often whether Indonesia actually even has a foreign policy, in the sense of a grand foreign policy. I know we talk about bebas aktif all the time, but it seems to me that it's never been reconceptualized, redefined after the Cold War. I mean, it made sense during the Cold War, but after the Cold War, I don't know what it means. And I don't think it's actually ever been redefined. Because the foreign policy is so vague, that cornerstone of that foreign policy that you mentioned, I think is also kind of vague, again with all due respect to Dewi. You say ASEAN is the cornerstone, but it remains unclear to me really what Indonesia wants to achieve with ASEAN. I mean, it wants a leadership role, but for what purpose?
Okay.
Except for prestige. Let me just say that with the ASEAN Economic Community, for example, it seems to me that we don't really have an agenda with it. I mean, what is it that we want to achieve? It's easy to say what the Singaporeans, for example, want to achieve with it, but it's harder to think about what the Indonesians want to achieve with it. For the forestry people,
Okay,
I just wonder whether
very quickly, please.
yeah. I just wonder whether you might have a comment as to why, in spite of the decades of the environmental movement in Indonesia, as I recall, neither set of candidates said anything substantive about the environment during the presidential debates and what that may mean for you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry that took too long.
Fitriyani, we could have discussed this further, but it's good that you bring this up as with the distrust of institution. I think if we look back at Ibu Evi's table on the reform, on how difficult time it is, especially for the second term, is that there's this emergence of indicative or indications of how corrupt each of the ministry that will be holding any commitment on the environment and climate. I'm talking about Ministry of Forestry. If there is any one of them, I'm not talking personally, I'm talking about agency. Is that it's a conflicting of interest. If we were trusting them with the whole thing, and okay, well, you reduce the emissions, but you plan and you give the license at the same time, it will be odd. So there is debates on that, and because UKP4 as the agency under the president's office to overview the whole ministers and with the main mandate to debottleneck, it will be faster. It has an acceleration of making a breakthrough. So rather than concentrating on the distrust, at that time it was concentrating on how we're going to speed this up further until we can actually have a hard evidence of sense of reducing emissions. So that's the first. So this is why also that the KPK and UKP4 are very close in coordinating on the forest reform and emission reductions as well. Although it seems odd why the corruption body will have to do that. But you know, I'm here to discuss later. It's very interesting comments on how, despite the decades of environmental movement, it doesn't have a very strong statement even in the campaign of the next presidency. However, on the last debate of the presidential debate, Jokowi made it very clear for 3 minutes, talking about how important to retain the forest. He even mentioned the one map, conflict, and special plan. So it's taking, I think it's interesting that it's taking a different format of terminologies and linguistic. In Nawacita, there's nothing about environment. It says pangan and tanah, which is land, which everything else we hope that will be included in it.
All right. Thank you for all the questions. For the first question, it is an escape. It is not. I don't think it is an escape because foreign policy is a must. You become the community of the. You are part of the international community. Indonesia have to act somewhere, somehow, to respond whatever happened in the regional and global setting. So if you said foreign policy an escape, I'm not sure. But what I'm really think is, SBY use foreign policy to express his personal fulfillment. Yesterday, gratefully mentioned about complacency, so that's maybe a right thing to do, not like really to escape, but it used to express his personal fulfillment, to do things that he prefer to do rather than things that he doesn't really like to do at home, something like that. For the second question, how about the South China Sea? I don't think we can solve the South China Sea problem. The COC is only to manage the conduct. We cannot expect much from that. It is an unsolvable issue indeed. That's Professor Hasim Jalal once mentioned, because there's 5 countries competing for 2 very similar claims. Other Malaysia, Brunei, Philippines, and Vietnam partial claims. So it's impossible for ASEAN to solve that issue. What ASEAN can do with COC is to mitigate the conflict and not to be escalated further. We don't expect big countries come to help because it will make it even more complicated. It even make it worse. The best thing is to comply with the COC and then to bring the case to the court, International Court of Justice. That's the best solution to do that. So I think that's ASEAN would like prefer to do. But not all the conflicting parties agreed for that. Is Indonesia have foreign policy? That depends. What do you mean by foreign policy? I mean, what the policy Indonesia for ASEAN, the policy of Indonesia for and other issue in the world is a policy. But what we lack is actually well-coordinated policy. Yeah? What we lack is a solid and visionary policy. This is also one of the recommendations that my team made for the next president. We have been asked to make recommendation, and one of the recommendations we said that this next cabinet has to have a visionary and grand policy that will oversee what Indonesia should be in 10, 20 years, not reactive foreign policy. What Indonesia achieved in ASEAN? There have been any serious conflict in the last 45 years. there's an ASEAN. Before ASEAN was established, there was a confrontation in Indonesia and Malaysia. There was a conflict between Philippines and Malaysia over the Sabah, etc. We have to see the history, what happened in 1960s, and why it's bring ASEAN in. So the purpose of ASEAN mainly is political stability of the region. And that's a huge, we have seen that as taken for granted for that peaceful, stable in the region. But if you see counterfactual analysis, if ASEAN were not there, what happened in Southeast Asia? Even with ASEAN or there, we already see some conflict in South China Sea and a lot of boundaries, conflict in boundaries. So I think the biggest achievement of ASEAN is to transform physical conflict into institutional debates in ASEAN meetings, numerous ASEAN meetings. If then ASEAN would like to go further by creating ASEAN community, it's also because of the institutionalization of the ASEAN and the interaction that 10 ASEAN countries has been done along this time. They won't have that goals in 1967 when ASEAN was built. It was only mentioned in the Bangkok Declaration that ASEAN only for stability of the region and for cooperation of the regional countries for the prosperity of the people. That's it. There is no mention about ASEAN community. It's only come later on. Yes, thank you.
Okay, unfortunately, sorry for those who had further questions. We have run out of time. Can you please join me in thanking our speakers today?